Good morning, everybody. We'd like to say thank you today for taking some time out of your day to log in to learn a little more about how you can get the most out of your professional camera system. Now, today we're going to go over a few things. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. My name is Troy Barron. I'm the National Sales Manager here for Channel Vision Technology. Just a little background on me. Once upon a time, I did the custom install world on the retail side, worked in the distribution of AV products, and now work for the manufacturer. So the good news is I have been in the industry for a little while. I'll be glad to help you out with anything that we need, and I'll be your tour guide on today's training. For those of you who are not familiar with the Channel Vision product line, just a quick little overview. Excuse me. Channel Vision is one of the largest structured wiring manufacturers in North America. We make a variety of products from enclosures to data distribution to phone distribution and everything in between. We also have a full line of IR control systems that are all true plasma-proof solutions to make your installs much easier, as well as our ARIA audio line, which offers high-performance multi-room amplifiers, along with a full line of speakers. Channel Vision is also a licensed manufacturer of A-bus audio technology for audio and power over Cat5, as well as intercom solutions, surveillance solutions for both analog and IP, which we'll be talking about today, as well as Channel Vision exclusive technology. Now today, we're going to go over a few things. And if you guys are already doing CCTV, some of this may be a little bit of a review, but confident that you'll take away some learning tips and some application-based training here. We're going to talk a little bit about camera specifications and what those mean in terms of true performance. We're also going to look at placement. How do you know where the camera gets installed to get the best performance you need? Talk a little bit about system design and integrating it all together, as well as installation techniques and how to set everything up on the network. Now, if you're not doing CCTV and you're considering it, consider this. Over the next 2 years, CCTV and video surveillance is expected to have the widest growth in our industry, above home networking, energy management, home automation, and commercial networking. You'll find that video surveillance and security offers the widest growth potential. Another reason you should be considering getting into CCTV is that according to the FBI in 2010, there was over 2 million burglaries, and over 74% of all those burglary offenses were on residential properties. Now, many of us installers here do work with the homeowner and the end users directly. So these are the customers that we have that we're talking about here. Now, if we're talking about analog CCTV, you do have a couple pros and cons to go along with it. On the pro side, you will have an initial lower cost. Generally speaking, analog cameras will cost much less than IP network cameras. You're also going to get greater compatibility. Channel Vision cameras or any analog CCTV does allow you to mix and match camera models with different manufacturers so that you can get the best performance for your specific application. And generally speaking, analog cameras tend to perform a little bit better in low light because of the way the video image is processed on the computer chip inside the camera. Some of the other cons on the analog CCTV side is you do have limited feature sets in terms of with the new advancements of IP resolution and digital zoom and megapixels and video analytics. Some of these features are not available in analog models. And of course, you are stuck with wire. You do have to use traditional cabling to make all of these systems work. Now, with that being said, let's get things started. There are a few other benefits I want to go through before we get into that. When you're looking at some additional benefits of CCTV, start with a long history of implementation. Analog CCTV has been around since the 1940s, and quite frankly, not much has changed except for some performance indicators. Again, you will get a low-cost solution with a larger selection of products available. Being that it's been around since 1940, most things use similar technologies and similar integration methods. And nowadays, you even have the option to integrate with a hybrid system, which does involve IP recording as well as analog on the same system. Now, with that being said, let's get into some terminology stuff. Now, throughout this question, since not everybody here has microphones and some people are calling in and there's a variety of different people we have online today, If you do have any questions, we will have a couple sections dedicated to answering questions. You can type your questions in the box on the right-hand side, and we will address those questions during the appropriate times. In the event we don't answer all of your questions, we will certainly get back to you after the training. With that being said, let's proceed and review some terminology. When we're talking about wire here, analog surveillance typically uses RG59, which is a coax cable, and 18.2 for power, because you still need to power the camera. This is that expensive cabling we were referring to, and this is required for any analog CCTV system regardless of the manufacturer. Nowadays you have alternatives to just running these two wires here. You can use a simple Cat5 cable as shown here on the right in conjunction with what's called a video balun. A video balun will take the video signal as well as the power and put them all on one Cat5 cable using a balun dongle, which will allow you to integrate the cameras using the existing wire. Now, that's for the wire portion of it, since we're in regards to analog cameras. Some other stuff we're going to look at is resolution. So how does this relate to cameras? Well, for starters, if a camera is spec'd at 380 TV lines of resolution detail, 650 is obviously a higher number. The higher number is going to indicate higher quality picture. Now, how does this translate in the terminology that you'll see out there? 580 lines, 540 TVL. What does this mean? Well, TV lines are referred to as the resolution of an analog security camera, and they're essentially broken down into two sections. And this is referring to the image that's being captured. When reading a security camera specification sheet, you'll see two sets of numbers. The rating sensor for the camera and one list of pixels. For example, 768 by 498 vertical. This is the image sensor and is equivalent to 540 TV lines of resolution. Okay, great, Troy. So how does that compare to a lot of the other resolutions that are out there? You know, everybody talks about 1080p and so on and so forth. So let's take a look at how CCTV resolution compares to other resolution standards. Here's an example. You're going to take a look at the chart here, and you'll see that HDTV is comprised of 1920 megapixels by 1080, and a standard HDTV is 1280 by 720. This is where the term 720p comes from. And analog cameras range from the CIF standard to 4CIF and just above that. So we're not talking about analog video providing you with an HD quality signal. Now, with that being said, let's talk about some other resolutions in terms of what that translates into. When we're looking at CIF versus D1 are two terms that you will hear a lot when you're looking at specifications. A lot of manufacturers try to talk about this, but the truth is not a lot of people understand it. So if you take a closer look, what this is really referring to is the storage aspect ratio of the image. Now, the storage aspect ratio is the digital size of the image as it's stored on your digital media, like your hard drive, for example. For instance, the highest resolution that you're using a composite video, which is what an analog camera signal is 720 by 480 pixels. Now, this is also the same as standard definition movie, which is also equivalent to D1. Now, that's a lot of information right there, but you can see there on the chart that D1 is basically the best video quality resolution that you can get out of an analog camera. So why is this important? Before I get into that, let me tell you a little about this. In many cases, prices do not in this industry actually reflect performance. Most end users and some installers don't know the difference between one CIF and full D1 recording resolution. Now, in this specification, this is what determines quality above all else. Now, a DVR is basically just a computer that has the sole purpose of capturing images and electronically communicating with a security device such as alarm panels, door switches, pan-tilt zoom cameras. And the price of a DVR is affected by how much processing power it has available. The most important specification in any DVR is recorded resolution of each channel. The compression technology followed by the frame rate. Now, so why is this important? Well, there's a few reasons, specifically playback and recording. Now, many cheap DVRs that you'll find out there may mention D1. Oh, yes, it's a D1 recording DVR, especially those cameras you might find at Costco, for example, on the DVRs they sell there. Now, what they're not telling you is that in the fine print it says half D1 or D1 on all channel and SIF on all others. So that's a very big detail, and I'll tell you a little why in just a second. They're also going to mention frames per second being relevant to the recording and what the playback provides being clean or a jerky picture. So we'll talk a little more about frames per second in another slide. So again, why is this important? Well, most DVR systems play back in full D1 resolution. That's most systems, play back full D1 resolution, which is what you see on the full screen. Now, question, so if my original recording was only done in SIF 1, which is that resolution we looked at earlier, which obviously is lower than D1, then how can it play back in full resolution? Well, what some manufacturers are doing are using the software to digitally zoom the pre-recorded images to help save money, and in terms, a lot of money. In short, that requires a lot less hardware, a lot less processing power, and think of it like using PaintShop to digitally enhance the image quality. Now, the quality of the image is adversely affected. More importantly, so is the integrity of the surveillance system. Now, for example, a casino will demand the full one in and out, which means it has to record at full resolution and play back at full resolution. With casinos, they have a legal obligation for this, for each channel to be originally recorded in its full D1 resolution, and there is no acceptance of digitally enhanced video. So with that being said, we'll touch base a little more on this a little bit later. But this storage we're talking about here also has to do with aspect ratio. The display aspect ratio can be displayed as what's referred to as a 4.3 aspect ratio, which is an NTSC standard, which is a video standard. Now, the limits of lines of data that can actually be displayed are 768 on a 4:3 picture, which will result in a 540 TV lines looking something like standard definition or 4.3. 16.9 is a wider format and is typically used for true HD. Remember when you used to buy those DVDs and they used to say full screen or widescreen? Widescreen is what your TVs look like nowadays. All your flat panel TVs are rectangles, not squares. Now, we're talking a little bit about frame rate, frames per second here. Now, as an example, a movie theater is shown in 24 frames per second. That's video at 15 frames per second is still considered to be full motion video. And in some instances, you can still capture the image you need in 7.5 frames or less. But the frames per second is actually a measurement of how motion video is displayed. This term applies equally to both film and digital video and is referring to each frame in a still image. If you think about the example of when they used to draw cartoons, every image was a still image, and when put together would create the illusion of motion. This is a similar concept to frames per second. Now, this is another feature that you're going to want to look at on your DVRs. Like we talked about earlier with regards to D1, being the resolution being recorded in, full motion video is considered 30 frames per second. Again, full motion video at D1 is the best resolution at the highest frames per second, at 30 frames per second. So do take note on your DVR specifications when you're speccing in your projects. If you need full motion video and you want it to be fluid, not jerky, this is something that you'll have to take note of. So for example, if you have an 8-channel DVR that says 240 frames per second, if you do the math, that's referring to the whole DVR's performance. So 240 frames per second divided by 8 channels equals 30 frames per second. Now, I'm not a math guy, but I'm pretty sure that that to me translates into true full motion video. As a side note, all Channel Vision DVRs do record in full D1 resolution with full video frame rates at 30 frames per second. With that being said, let's talk a little more about cameras. Talk about lux rating. So what is a lux? A lux is just a unit of measurement that quantifies the ambient light that's available. You can use a light meter to measure this if you want, but that's really just a detail. What does the lux have to do with cameras? Well, it's very important because a camera needs a minimum amount of ambient light in order to produce an image. If a camera specification says that the minimum illumination is 0.2 lux, then that means the camera will not produce an image if the light that is available is less than 0.2 lux. Okay, Troy, you're throwing a lot of fancy terms at me. What does that mean in terms of real life? Well, if you look at this little chart here, this will give you a little breakdown comparison of lux rating versus what you have available to you. So, for example, you can see here that 0.25 lux is equivalent to a full moonlight on a clear night. 0.25 lux. So that's just an example for you. But when you're talking about cameras working at night, you might have to talk about a night vision camera. So how do night vision cameras work? Night vision cameras use an LED illuminator to shine infrared light, which is invisible to humans, on an object that's in the dark. And the reflected light is what forms an image on the camera's sensor. That's how IR illuminators work. Now, for example, everybody knows that white reflects better than black in terms of colors. So at night, against a black surface, wearing a black outfit, you might not get quite as good of nighttime viewing, even with LED illuminators, because again, they're using reflected light to produce the image. So how do you get more light available? Well, one thing you can do is use a standalone illuminator. This is also an accessory available from Channel Vision. But what this does is it's just an LED illuminator. Think of it like a spotlight for your camera. There's no physical camera involved in this system. It's literally just a spotlight for your camera to help improve its performance. By placing the stand illuminator near the object that wants to be viewed, you can get more efficient light for your camera. This can also be done with porch lights, street lights, floodlights. All of these will play into the ambient light available for the camera to produce an image. Now, some more camera terminology you might run across is a term called WDR. We sure do love our acronyms in this industry, don't we? So what is WDR? Well, WDR refers to wide dynamic range. WDR cameras are able to capture and display both bright and dark areas within the same frame while being able to produce an image where your bright areas are not too saturated and your dark areas are not too dark. Think of it as backlight compensation. In an example here on the left, you'll see a WDR camera without the wide dynamic range feature turned on, looking at a hallway where an entrance is. Behind the entrance, you'll see a lot of light, which confuses the camera, essentially, making dark areas darker and white areas even brighter. The WDR feature does this compensation that we're talking about here so that all the images appear clear and not oversaturated. Now, all of this information has to do with some more things. We just talked about using wide dynamic range cameras for a really good application in a hallway where you're facing a door, so when they open the door you don't get that silhouette and you can actually see an image. That's a good time to use a WDR camera. Something else that you should be looking at when you're talking about specifications of your camera is the camera chip format. So what does it mean if a camera has a 1/4 or 1/3 inch Sony color CCD chip? Well, this is referring to the image sensor chip inside of the camera. Basically what happens is that the lens focuses the light onto the chip to produce an image. Now, the size of the image sensor is also known as the format, and it ranges from a 1/4 inch, a 1/3 inch, or a 1/2 inch. And this also plays a role in determining the field of view of the camera, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Now, there's a lot of calculators online, so you don't have to remember all of this. You just have to be able to identify the specification and then use that in part of the formula, which we're going to look at in just a second. So besides the CCD chip size, you should be looking at the focal length of the camera's lens. Why should you care about the size of the lens? Well, because the camera lens is what determines how large the image will be on your television screen. A short focal length, such as 3.6, will show a large area at a closer distance, whereas a longer focal length, such as 9 millimeters, will show a smaller area more zoomed in at a further distance. So the higher the number, the longer the zoom. So now that we know a little bit about the CCD chip and what that means, and as well as the camera focal length's relevance in terms of producing an image, how do I know what type of area of coverage I'm going to get with my camera? With that being said, you're going to take those two pieces of information, the focal length of the lens plus the size of the CCD chip, and then you can use a formula, which is something like this. Now again, I'm not a math guy, but this is a pretty basic breakdown, and there are many calculators online that can help you with this as well, including tools available on channelvision.com. But to determine the area field of view that you're going to see with the camera on your television, the first thing that you'll need to do is determine how far away is the distance to your target. So in our example here, it's 20 feet away. We want to see the front door, which is 20 feet away from the camera. In this application, I really only need to see an area that's about 10 feet wide. So you need to divide the width by the target area. So if I really only want to see an area 10 feet wide, that's 20 feet away. 20 divided by 10 equals 2. Okay? Now we use the CCD chip size of the camera, which we looked at earlier, which we know is a 1.3-inch sensor. Now, to do this math, that's equivalent to a 4.8. Now, this is a fixed multiplier. I'm not quite sure where this came from, but this is the number that you're going to use to multiply. So now you're going to multiply 2, which is the distance divided by the width, times the fixed multiplier of your lens, 4.8, which is equivalent to 9.6. So the last piece that you can do is multiply that by 0.75 to determine the height, which is equivalent to 7.5 feet in this example. Okay, that's a lot of math, Troy, but what does it mean in terms of how it looks on a screen? If you take a look here, here's a couple examples using a variety of different cameras in different millimeters on the focal length of the lens. On the left-hand side, you'll see a 3.6 millimeter lens. At 15 feet away, will yield an image that's approximately 20 feet wide by 15 feet high. If you're using a more narrow focal length, such as 6 millimeters, you want to zoom in a little bit further, you would get an area about 12 feet wide for coverage. And if you're using a larger zoom lens, like a 9 millimeter lens, you'll be able to get an image about 8 feet wide. So some other examples, a little bit further back. So my camera's mounted on and I want to cover the driveway, for example, which is about 25 to 30 feet wide. If that's the area I want to view at 25 feet away, a 3.6 millimeter camera will cover an area about 33 feet wide. If you're using a 6 millimeter lens, about 20 feet, and a 9 millimeter, an area coverage about 13 feet. Now, you might be saying, Troy, your fancy computer graphics aren't just doing it for me. So what does it look like in real life? Well, you can take a look here. This is another example at about 70 feet away, covering the whole territory of the property from the street, okay? From the street to the front door. With a 3.6 millimeter lens, I can see everything, but obviously I can't see facial recognition or anything like that. I can see somebody going to the front door, but I'd not be able to see who it is. With a 6 millimeter lens, you can see that it covers much less area, but at a closer distance. Or you can use a 9 millimeter lens and almost be able to see who's coming in to the front door. Now, those are a variety of different ways to choose the right camera and the types of field of view that you can expect to get from those cameras. Now, there are other types of cameras, including pan-tilt zoom cameras, which you might want to use for an application. So when you're installing a PTZ camera, you got to look at a couple different things. For one thing, what is RS-485 and how does it work? Well, technically speaking, RS-485 is a serial control methodology that allows different items to be connected together and controlled by a single device. Now, it was originally developed to control machines and factories, but is perfectly suited for cameras on a large system where they're all connected together. Another term that you're going to look at for pan-tilt zoom cameras is what's known as Pelco P and Pelco D. Now, what these are serial command protocols that establish a common language that can be understood by both the camera controller and the camera itself. These are just protocols, and there are other protocols available, but fairly easy to switch by just using a configuration on both your controller and your camera. Now, there are other camera types besides pan-tilt zoom cameras. There's a variety of different options, including pinhole cameras, flush mount cameras, dome cameras, pan-tilt zooms, and bullets. So which one is right for you? Well, the technical answer is it depends, which is my technical answer for almost any question. But let's take a closer look. So if you're using a pinhole camera, these are obviously great for covert surveillance. The pinhole cameras that Channel Vision manufactures are slightly larger than a postage stamp and are great for covert surveillance. You can also use a flush mount camera, which is a popular, unobtrusive, and typically used indoors, in foyers, hallways, and bedrooms. Now, bullet cameras are traditional cameras that you'll see a lot of, and they're very versatile, really good for outdoors, and gives you the chance to mount it on the wall and adjust the cameras to your liking. Other types of cameras include dome cameras, which can be considered probably the most versatile options, used for either indoor or outdoor, and in some options can be used to deter vandalism with a vandal-resistant design. Other types of cameras include IP cameras, which are viewable over the internet using a Cat5 system, just Cat5 wiring, and typically are scalable to larger systems beyond that of a 16-channel DVR. Now, all of these different types of cameras have different types of lenses. Now, looking at different types of lenses, we've also got to talk about a few things. Now, earlier we talked about focal length, 3.6, 6 millimeter, and 9 millimeter, as well as the CCD chip in terms of determining the field of view. So when you're talking about the lens itself, we're looking at a couple different options here. For one, you can have a fixed lens. A fixed lens relies specifically for sufficient depth of field to produce an image sharp quality. Now, a fixed lens is just that, fixed, non-adjustable. Typically, you'll find this in a variety of different ranges from 3.6 to 6 millimeter to 5.5 millimeter, for example, are fixed lenses, and this is the context we're talking about here. Other types of lenses that you'll find are called varifocal lenses. Now, a varifocal lens is basically a camera lens that has an adjustable or varifocal focal length in which the focus changes as does the focal length. This is the physical lens zooming in, not magnification digitally. With a varifocal lens, it allows you to adjust the field of view within a specific range, for example, 2.8 to 9 millimeters, after the camera is installed without the need to change lenses. What you're basically doing with this is set it and forget it. You set it to the range that you need, and it offers you the widest variety of options. Now, typically a varifocal camera will cost you a little more than a fixed lens. However, if you think about it as having multiple lenses with it so you can adjust it to the specific field of view you need, might be a valuable tool in your arsenal. Another type of camera to consider on your lens is if it has what's called an auto iris. Now, an auto iris is a lens that compensates for variations in different light levels, from sunlight to shadows, from light to dark, so that you can still get a solid focal length. Now, do take a look at your camera specification sheets, because some of them will just have fixed lens, some will just have varifocal lenses, and some will have an auto iris. This is a really good application to compensate for varying light levels and is useful for outdoor applications, especially if you're going to be having changing lights, porch light comes on, street lights comes on, so that it automatically adapts to the existing lighting so that you can still get the field of view you're looking for and the image that you come to expect. Now, there's a handful of other analog cameras that we can take a look at, and these are an offering from Channel Vision. I won't go through all of them in great detail. Just know that we do have wide dynamic range options in vandal-proof varifocal lens style cameras, as well as high-resolution bullets with fixed lenses, those pinhole options we talked about earlier, as well as wide dynamic range options, including indoor domes with fixed lens and a variety in between. In addition to that, we do have IP cameras. Now, IP cameras are going to give you HD quality resolution. If you refer back to that little chart that we looked at earlier, megapixel refers to HD resolution. We have a full training on IP video for another day, but all of the Channel Vision IP cameras can offer you varifocal lenses, outdoor ratings of IP66, which means it's waterproof, a variety of different compressions, which in terms of refers to storage, as well as smartphone viewing, power over Ethernet access, central management software to record everything, as well as being on-VIF compliant, the drivers available for some automation systems such as Control 4. Now, with that being said, I'm going to take a look at our question list, so bear with me for just a moment. One of the questions we have listed is this PowerPoint going to be available for use later? The answer to that is yes. We do have a full library of trainings and recorded sessions on channelvision.com. You can click on our YouTube channel and find us there, or you can log in as a registered dealer where you can get access to all of this information just by requesting your passcode. Some other questions here. Do all of these cameras use power over Ethernet or just your IP cameras? In regards to that, if you refer back to that slide we looked at earlier, most analog cameras require 2 conductors for power and RG59, and that's a standard for all analog cameras. Now, with IP cameras, they can be power over Ethernet, which means they receive power at the camera from an Ethernet switch instead of having a local camera power supply, and a majority of Channel Vision's IP cameras do support PoE. But for all intents and purposes, consider PoE relevant only to IP cameras, unless you're using a dedicated Cat5 cable and a video balun like we looked at earlier. It looks like we may have a few more questions, but I think we'll have another section that we will be able to address those in. So if you do have any additional questions, do feel free to log those in the chat box, and we'll address them a little bit later. With that being said, let's talk a little bit about the DVR. Now, a couple benefits that you'll find with the DVR does give you the access to be able to remotely access this equipment from another location. You do get secure connectivity, which means we're having a dedicated piece of hardware that's recording our video cameras, and they do have a variety of different video compressions to offer you the best type of video storage and quality. So without further ado, let's take a look at some DVRs. Now, we're going to reference the 3G series DVR today, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the specifications and what that means to you, as well as how to set it up on the network. I'm going to show you about 7 steps and just show you how easy it is to get it live on the network. You don't have to be a network guru to get this. You just have to be able to follow a couple simple steps. Now, the DVR series that Channel Vision offers is called the 3G series. Now, there's a lot of features here: USB ports, dual streaming, dual video output, main, VGA, and spot monitoring, audio inputs, sensors, data setup, and it's available in a variety of different channels. Now, that's a lot of stuff. There's also, taking a closer look, what that means in terms of functionality. Dual USB ports is referring to the ability to use a USB mouse for control and a USB port for export. Now, you can see here on the larger series DVRs, we do have a drive bay available for a DVR record, DVD-RW, However, that's just an option that you have. You use the dual USB ports for a USB flash drive to export your video. Now, one question you might ask is, so how much storage do I need? And as I told you earlier, my technical answer for everything is it depends, and it really depends on a variety of different things, including the resolution that you're using, the compression that you're using, and how long you want to record. Here's an example. Using a 500 gig hard drive with 4 cameras at its best resolution, you can expect approximately 4 weeks of video if you're using motion setup. And again, there are a couple other variables that it depends on. But that's kind of a guideline for you. Now, some other features that you might hear about is dual streaming. Now, what dual streaming means is that these DVRs have 20% more capacity than past H.264 generations. H.264 is a compression that allows you to get the best quality video and use the least amount of space. Dual streaming in the context of DVRs refers to the ability to record a high-resolution image to the hard drive while streaming a lower resolution, lightweight version to your smartphone. So check your DVR to make sure it has dual streaming capability so that you can pull it up on your smartphone. We also have dual video outputs. What this means is that you can use a traditional LCD out of the VGA as well as using a composite video out to go directly to your TV or to your distribution method. Some more useful function that you'll find in the Channel Vision G Series DVR is the ability to do a still image snapshot during your playback mode, the ability to adjust the resolution, frame rate, which we talked about earlier, and video quality on a per channel basis, as well as having an AVI file converter built in with timestamp. What this means is that that's legally submissible in court because there's no altering of the file. It's a native AVI file that can be played in almost any media player, as well as the ability to zoom in with the existing area, as well as having the same on-screen display for both the DVR and remote access, individual user authority, as well as the central management software and smartphone viewing. So why do you care about these features? Well, that means if you're logging in from the DVR right there or you're remoting into your customer's computer, you don't have to learn a different format. It's going to look just the same. Other useful features with the user authority management gives you access to up to 4 users with individual authority. This means that you can manage your DVR securely and grant specific people access to specific features. For example, you might be doing a recording at a restaurant. The night shift manager doesn't need to see the camera that's watching him count the money in the money room. You can give him individual authority over specific channels and specific features, while giving the administrator access to everything. Other useful benefits that are included in the G Series DVR are central management software. When would you use this? There's a couple different applications. So it does allow you to connect up to 16 DVRs. So for example, if a shop owner's got 3 different locations, he could log in from one computer and be able to see all 3 locations at the same time through the browser, while grouping the cameras together, such as loading docks, cash registers, doors, and be able to actually record and back up while he's watching the other videos, all from a remote location. So the central management software looks a little something like this, and you'll see that once you get your hands on a Channel Vision DVR. Now, you do have access to all the different smartphones that we talked about, Apple, Android, BlackBerry. There are apps available for both the Apple iPhone and the Android operating system, and through the browser for your Windows or BlackBerry phones. Now, to make things real easy for you, you can do all of this stuff at the same time, watch your video, access your recorded video, and do playback without having to stop one to start another using built-in SATA hard drives. Now, to make it real super easy for you, we took these 3 and put them all in a box. So next time your customer says, hey, what about this kit I saw at Costco? You could offer them a professional solution that's going to offer you that full D1 recording we talked about, so you can get the best quality resolution and the best quality video without the hefty price tag. We have kits available in 1, 2, and 3 versions. Allows you to have a DVR in a lockbox so you can hide it in a secure location. A kit that allows you to have 4 high-resolution outdoor cameras with the DVR and hard drive, and an outdoor and an indoor version available, all for under $600 dealer price. Great value for the solutions that you need. Now, we told you earlier that we're going to tell you how to set this up on the network. So without further ado, let's take a look at some networking basics. Now, before you get started with your DVR, just to recap on everything we've come with so far, we talked about different field of view and how you can determine that by using the CCD chip size and the focal length of the lens. We talked about different types of cameras, as well as different types of lenses, as well as different recording resolutions with D1, SIP, and some of the other details out there. Now that you have the camera background, we're going to talk a little bit about the DVR and how to set it up. Now, once you get your DVR on the network, you'll be able to view this from outside the network on your smartphone or from a remote location. But before you do that, you'll need a couple things with you. You'll have to jot down the router brand and model number. You will also need access to the router administrator password and login, as well as make note of your brand, of your modem, as well as note if you have a dynamic or static IP address. Typically, you'll know if you have a static IP address because you'll be paying for it. Most residential customers are using a dynamic IP address, which means the IP address is always changing. But we'll take a look a little more at that a little down the road. To find your IP address, you can use a third-party website called ipchicken.com, which will help determine your external IP address. Now, don't worry, this is going to be fairly painless. But before we get into that, there are a couple more acronyms you need to know. LAN versus WAN. That's local area network versus wide area network. The local area network will typically see 192.168. Something else. And this is the IP address that's inside of the network. A lot of times customers will call us and say, hey, I can see my DVR when I log in from inside the house, but I can't see it from outside. Typically, that's because they're using the local area network address, and this is used in the settings of the DVR. And the reason I told you to find out your IP chicken or your external IP address, which will typically start with something like 64.183 or something similar, will be used in the hosting settings of your DVR to be able to access it remotely. So know that you have a handful of information there. Let's take a look at the network setup and just how easy it is. Well, start by going to your run command and type in CMD, or the command prompt. This will take you to a DOS prompt, which looks like computers that used to work back in the day, and you'll type in a code here just called ipconfig/all in the DOS prompt that appears. Once you do that, just hit enter. And once you get to that screen, you're going to have a pen and paper with you because you're going to have to jot down 4 things from this screen. The first thing that you're going to take is the IP address. The IP address here is referring to the IP address of the computer on the network. The next thing you'll have to do is jot down some more information from the network, specifically the default gateway, the DNS server, and your subnet mask. All of this information will be plugged into the DVR in a later slide and is all available on the same page from accessing this one prompt. Once you log into your DVR as an administrator and go to the network portion of your DVR, just plug in the information you just wrote down. You plug in your subnet mask, your default gateway, and your DNS server in the fields provided. And then there will be an IP address slot as well. This is where you're going to write down that IP address that you wrote down earlier. The difference here is that you're going to change the last 3 digits. You are going to be the one who physically assigns the IP address to the DVR, giving the DVR an address on the network just by changing the last 3 digits so that it's different than that of your computer. Once you have plugged in and changed those last 3 digits, you're almost done. Next, just click the checkbox that says HTTP and select your port. Now this will be port 5400. Now another thing, when you look at some of these other DVRs that say plug and play setup and things like that, when you plug it in and it automatically has a port forwarded, what that's basically doing is using what's called port 80. Now there's a variety of different ports on your computer that range from 1 to 10,000, and these are used for different applications. Port 80 is a default port that's opened up to the network. Now, why am I changing mine to 5400? Because port 80 is vulnerable to access from hackers. Anybody that logs into port 80 and knows anything about a network, like most hackers do, will be able to access everything if you have port 80 forwarded on your network. So by changing the port to 5400, we can create a secure network. The 5400 series and 8000 series ports are typically allocated for security devices. So now that we've plugged in port 5400, all we got to do is hit OK. Now we have to go to the network portion of it. Now, this is the only part that people seem to have a little trouble with, but it's actually really easy. As long as you have that administrator login and password like we talked about earlier, you just click and log in to the virtual server page on your router. From here, you just plug in the information that you already wrote down and you already know. You plug in the IP address of the DVR and then the port that you want to open. This port we talked about, 5400, will now allow you to access the DVR remotely by looking at the IP address specifically of the DVR on the network. Click the checkbox, and once you've done that, you're done. Now that all your information is plugged in, you can do what's called a DDNS setup. Now, this is a feature that right now allows you to have us host a free service for you. This talks a little more about that dynamic versus static IP address we talked about earlier. If you have a dynamic IP address, as most homeowners do, what a dynamic IP address is an IP address that's always changing. That means every time you log into the internet, it's a different IP address. So if you don't use the DNS service, then the next time you log into your DVR, it might not be there on that same IP address that you thought it was. What a dynamic DNS service does is it changes that IP address. So what I mean by that is that it gives you a solid number and then facilitates the changing of the IP address in the background. So you only have to remember that one number. If you have a static IP address, which means it's not changing, you can just use that one also. Just additional reference material for you. If you do need help forwarding the port on your router, for specific instructions, there is another third-party website called portforward.com, which will give you access to a lot of the different routers so that you could log in to see their specific features. Now, with the DDNS setup, you're almost done. What this is also going to allow you to do is provide your customer a free service, because many of those dynamic DNS services are charging services. By using the Channel Vision service, you will have a free DDNS support, which will continuously track the IP address and make it easier for your customer to log in. So instead of logging into your DVR through the browser by going to http://64.198. And having to remember all that information, you can just log into channelvisionsecurity.com and then the port number. That way you don't have to remember a full string of numbers, and you'll still be able to access everything on your system. Once you've done that, you're done. Click it in an Explorer, and you'll be able to view your cameras on the network. Now, that's a lot of information. I don't expect everybody to have to remember that. So what we did for you is there's a handy-dandy document on channelvision.com under the DVR G-Series specification sheets that outlines these steps for you with pictures so that you can walk through the steps and have reference material for a quick and easy setup. Because we understand for most of you guys, time is money. Once your camera's on, your DVR is on the network, you can access it from any computer and any smartphone with the information that you have plugged in. Now, that is a good little setup there. Now, before we get a little more into it and we wrap things up here, talk a little more about camera applications. Now, you can view these cameras on a variety of different places, but first you want to ask yourself these questions. We talked about finding out your CCD chip, how far away the image that you need to view is, and a handful of those other questions also. But you definitely want to ask these two questions. Where are the assets that you're trying to cover? and where is the choke point that leads to the assets that you're trying to cover. These are the two places you're going to want to consider when you're mounting your cameras, because there's basically only two places that really matter: where the assets reside and what is the access point to those assets. Now, you're going to want to place a camera so that it covers the full asset in its entirety, so that you can identify any kind of tampering, vandalism, or theft. Now, if you place your camera at the choke point refers to a point in the system where you will be able to notice the possible threat that will give you clear view of either the person or the vehicle as it enters. For example, if you're using it in a small retail store, you might want to cover the cash registers and the safe and the high-priced products of the stockroom. That's the obvious asset that you want to cover. The less obvious point is your choke points, which would be the entrance door, the back door, the receiving door, or the service entrance. This would be giving you the minimum area that you might want to cover, so you may need additional coverage areas for the specific assets as well as the choke points. So just consider those two in your applications when you're speccing in your cameras and where they're going to go. Now, once you have everything set up on the network, you can view your cameras almost anywhere. You can use a VGA monitor and just plug your DVR into a monitor. You can also use the video output to a television directly, or you could modulate it through a distribution system to be seen on a channel on the TV, on all the TVs in the house. There's additional details you may be involved in that, but you can also just log in through the browser or just hit an app on your phone to pull it up. If you're using one of those fancy automation screens, with some of the channel vision products, you'll be able to view them on your fancy touchscreen or your fancy iPad or other tablet as well. Now, those are the different places that you can view the camera, but there's a lot of stuff we talked about today. So just to recap what we went through, we talked about some of the camera specifications in terms of D1 recording resolution, referring to the actual storage. We talked about frames per second in relation to how smooth your video is going to be. We talked about cautions that you need to be aware of when you're looking at specifications and making sure it's D1 on all channels as opposed to D1 on one channel for the best possible recording. We talked about how to calculate your field of view by determining the distance to your camera and making note of the CCD chip as well as the focal length of the camera lens, as well as a variety of different specification pieces and some networking basics so that you can get the DVR online. Now, with that being said, I'm going to open up the line for additional questions, so hang tight for 1 second while we address some of these. One question here is, so if a customer or if a vendor refers to a 700 TV line camera, what's the highest television lines available for an analog camera? Typically, approximately 700 lines is the best resolution that you can get. Now, this is equivalent to like what we were talking about earlier regarding the recording capability of the DVR in terms of how it processes storage. So it's one thing to have a 700 line camera. It's a whole other thing to have a DVR that can process a 700 TV line camera. Another question here is, are your DVRs equipped with HDMI? The technical answer for that is, it depends on if you want one. All of our DVRs, as it stands today, do come with a VGA and a video connection. On the 8 and 16, for a small little fee, you can add an HDMI connector so that you could then integrate it with your Matrix or your customer's AV system by viewing it directly on your TV. Another question is regarding the apps for the smartphone. Are these free apps? Yes. Today, all of Channel Vision's apps are available free in the App Store. Now, if you're using a Channel Vision DVR, you have a variety of different apps that you can use, and we don't have our branded app released for our DVR, but we do for our IP cameras. But the current app available for both Android and iPhone is called iWatch DVR 2. This is the app that you'd want to use when using the Channel Vision DVR. Let's see here. The question, do your DVRs work on both Mac and PC? Very good question. Not many DVRs work on both Macintosh and computers. The Channel Vision DVRs will work on any of those systems. How do your DVRs compare to others? Well, that's a very broad statement, but I will have to say that generally speaking, channel vision DVRs are going to offer you all the features that you need, all the important features like we talked about, full D1 recording, best compression, smartphone access, central management software. We're going to offer you all of those features without that hefty price tag that's going to break the bank. Because we understand in these tough economic times, you still have to be able to get those jobs with your customers. Now, as I mentioned, if we didn't answer all your questions, feel free to type them in if we didn't address them, and we'll be able to follow up with you at a later time. With that being said, we do have a few things that we can help you with also, including 24/7 tech support. So if you're out there on the job on the East Coast, you can always give us a call, even if it's after hours here on the West Coast. We can make sure that we help walk you through your setup and your system design. We also offer warranties, 1-year warranty on all of our powered products and 10 years on all of our passive products. We do offer free training, so if somebody charges you to attend today, do ask for your money back, as well as the ability to help you out with any systems that you need, whether you're doing a structured wiring enclosure or you need help with your camera system, as well as custom building opportunities. Now, like I said earlier, this training will be available on our YouTube channel, and we do have a full line of other products for you to take a look at, which we looked at earlier. So some few things that can help you out as well. If you want to talk about some other systems, you can also look at our application guide and download that from the channelvision.com website, as well as follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Now, I will encourage you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter because a little secret, we're going to be releasing top secret information, so you'll be the first to know, have access to specific promotions, and a variety of different other things if you like us on Facebook. All of our training videos will be accessible on our YouTube channel shortly following the training today, and you'll be able to access that at your leisure while you're at your desk or hand it over to your team so that they can also catch up on the learning. And if you do have any other opportunities, we will be talking about shortly about our intercoms and telephone entry systems in the month of October. But further out, if you do need any additional assistance, by all means, call us at this number, visit us on our website, send us an email. Being a smaller manufacturer, we certainly value our dealers, and our response time is very quick. By calling that 800 number on the screen, you can access tech support, and if you're an installer, you can access our emergency tech support by just pressing 2 after hours, and it'll get you access to an on-call technician. Now, I do want to thank everybody. I told you I would take about an hour of your time. I'm slightly over an hour at an hour and 2 minutes, so we certainly understand that your time is valuable. We appreciate you logging in today. If you did log in a little late and you missed some of the stuff, like I said, training will be available shortly on our website. And again, you can call us if there's any specific questions that you have. And if we didn't address your questions, look for a follow-up email that we can touch base with later. And like I said, anything we can do to help out, please give us a call. Again, my name is Troy Barron. We certainly appreciate you spending some time with us. So make a great day out of it and use this information to go make some more money. Thank you and have a great day.